Me, you. After Hurricane Ivan, Caymanians discovered we are vulnerable to calamities we thought only happened elsewhere. We were reminded then, as we are being reminded now, that we are resilient. We are powerful. We are community-minded, Caymankind. For the people of the Cayman Islands, moments of crisis also present opportunity. We are the narrators. You are the catalyst for change. We, you, are responsible. This is not just our pandemic story, but it is the story of how 3 tiny islands came together to change course in uncharted waters toward greater national solidarity, functionality, and pride. Me, you.
I wanted to do my part for the community to help protect the elders because my parents are of that generation and I'm super big on traveling. And in 2019, I traveled over 10 times and it's been 22 months since I've had a real vacation. So the pandemic had us locked up for over a year, just staying in our houses. And I'm just ready to get back out, see the world, gain new experiences, meet new people. And honestly, I'm not about the quarantine life. So that's why I went and got the vaccine.
I took the vaccine. I took it for myself. I took it for the patients I see, and I took it for the community. It's important. Protect yourself.
I took mine to protect myself and my family, my patients, and the greater community. Remember, everybody that gets this vaccine helps to protect the Caymanian community.
Do your research, but once you do the research, I think you'll realize that it is a safe and effective vaccine, and essentially it's what's going to be needed to help us come to some place of normalcy again in the world. And although we live in a little bubble in Cayman and we feel safe, to be able to sort of interact again with the rest of the world, we all need to do our part and take the vaccine.
I'm appealing to all Caymanians, especially those over 60. Please take the vaccine.
Just encouraging everybody who's eligible to go and get your vaccine.
So I hope you consider it, do the research, and get it done for yourself and for your fellow citizen.
We have lived with influenza for hundreds of years. The reason that it's such a successful virus is the fact that it is able to mutate very quickly. This particular coronavirus does not seem to mutate as much, although I have to tell you, I'm not a virologist, but that's my understanding. However, we certainly have seen mutations, there is no question. The fact that we have this new vaccine technology that can be changed relatively quickly to give something that's efficacious, or that's at least what we're being advised, the mRNA type vaccines, means that we have the ability perhaps to be a step ahead of this particular virus. So I'm hoping we will be able to get it really well under control. To say we can eliminate it is something that I can't say with confidence. We have been trying, for example, to eliminate polio for decades. We have almost got rid of it around the world, but it remains present in, I think, 3 countries in the world. So there are things we have not been able to get rid of, and there are things that we currently control with vaccinations. Polio, measles, we control it because they're so infectious, they manage to stay alive. We don't vaccinate enough people, but we control it and we live with it quite successfully. It could well be that we come to a stage where we live with this coronavirus quite successfully, but we need to continue to take active measures, for example, vaccinations, in order to keep it at bay.
The island depends heavily on tourism. So, it's going to be people coming from all over the world here, with this virus that's going around. I protected myself and most of all, my family, my friends, the people around me. I'm a young Caymanian water sports operator. That's my bread and butter. That's where I make my living. I beg you, please, to go out there, get vaccinated so borders can reopen as soon as possible and we all can get back to work.
The COVID-19 pandemic is affecting everything from forest cover and marine pollution to the behavior of wildlife, but most of all, of people. Me, you. After Hurricane Ivan, Caymanians discovered we are vulnerable to calamities we thought only happened elsewhere. We were reminded then, as we are being reminded now, that we are resilient. We are powerful. We are community-minded, Caymankind. For the people of the Cayman Islands, moments of crisis also present opportunity. We are the narrators. You are the catalyst for change. You are responsible. This is not just our pandemic story, but it is the story of how 3 tiny islands came together to change course in uncharted waters toward greater national solidarity, functionality, and pride. Me, you.
I wanted to do my part for the community to help protect the elders because my parents are of that generation and I'm super big on traveling. And in 2019, I traveled over 10 times and it's been 22 months since I've had a real vacation. So the pandemic had us locked up for over a year, just staying in our houses. And I'm just ready to get back out, see the world, gain new experiences, meet new people. And honestly, I'm not about the quarantine life. So that's why I went and got the vaccine.
I took the vaccine. I took it for myself. I took it for the patients I see, and I took it for the community. It's important. Protect yourself.
I took mine to protect myself and my family, my patients, and the greater community. Remember, everybody that gets this vaccine helps to protect the Caymanian community.
Do your research, but once you do the research, I think you'll realize that it is a safe and effective vaccine, and essentially it's what's going to be needed to help us come to some place of normalcy again in the world. And although we live in a little bubble in Cayman and we feel safe, to be able to sort of interact again with the rest of the world, we all need to do our part and take the vaccine.
I'm appealing to all Caymanians, especially those over 60. Please take the vaccine.
I'm just encouraging everybody who's eligible to go and get your vaccine.
So I hope you consider it, do the research, and get it done for yourself and for your fellow citizen.
We have lived with influenza for hundreds of years. The reason that it's such a successful virus is the fact that it is able to mutate very quickly. This particular coronavirus does not seem to mutate as much, although I have to tell you, I'm not a virologist, but that's my understanding. However, we certainly have seen mutations, there is no question. The fact that we have this new vaccine technology that can be changed relatively quickly to give something that's efficacious, or that's at least what we're being advised, the mRNA type vaccines, means that we have the ability perhaps to be a step ahead of this particular virus. So I'm hoping we will be able to get it really well under control. To say we can eliminate it is something that I can't say with confidence. We have been trying, for example, to eliminate polio for decades. We have almost got rid of it around the world, but it remains present in, I think, 3 countries in the world. So there are things we have not been able to get rid of, and there are things that we currently control with vaccinations. Polio, measles. We control it because they're so infectious, they manage to stay alive. We don't vaccinate enough people, but we control it and we live with it quite successfully. It could well be that we come to a stage where we live with this coronavirus quite successfully, but we need to continue to take active measures, for example, vaccinations, in order to keep it at bay.
The island depends heavily on tourism. So, it's going to be people coming from all over the world here, with this virus that's going around. I protected myself and most of all, my family, my friends, the people around me. I'm a young Caymanian water sports operator. That's my bread and butter. That's where I make my living. I beg you, please, to go out there, get vaccinated so borders can reopen as soon as possible and we all can get back to work.
The COVID-19 pandemic is affecting everything from forest cover and marine pollution to the behavior of wildlife, but most of all, of people. Me, you. After Hurricane Ivan, Caymanians discovered we are vulnerable to calamities we thought only happened elsewhere. We were reminded then, as we are being reminded now, that we are resilient. We are powerful. We are community-minded, Cayman-kind. For the people of the Cayman Islands, moments of crisis also present opportunity. We are the narrators. You are the catalyst for change. You are responsible. This is not just our pandemic story, but it is the story of how 3 tiny islands came together to change course in uncharted waters toward greater national solidarity, functionality, and pride. Me, you.
I wanted to do my part for the community to help protect the elders because my parents are of that generation and I'm super big on traveling. And in 2019, I traveled over 10 times and it's been 22 months since I've had a real vacation. So the pandemic had us locked up for over a year, just staying in our houses. And I'm just ready to get back out, see the world, gain new experiences, meet new people. And honestly, I'm not about the quarantine life. So that's why I went and got the vaccine.
I took the vaccine. I took it for myself. I took it for the patients I see, and I took it for the community. It's important. Protect yourself.
I took mine to protect myself and my family, my patients, and the greater community. Remember, everybody that gets this vaccine helps to protect the Caymanian community.
Do your research, but once you do the research, I think you'll realize that it is a safe and effective vaccine, and essentially it's what's going to be needed to help us come to some place of normalcy again in the world. And although we live in a little bubble in Cayman and we feel safe, to be able to sort of interact again with the rest of the world, we all need to do our part and take the vaccine.
I'm appealing to all Caymanians, especially those over 60. Please take the vaccine.
Just encouraging everybody who's eligible to go and get your vaccine.
So I hope you consider it, do the research, and get it done for yourself and for your fellow citizen.
We have lived with influenza for hundreds of years. The reason that it's such a successful virus is the fact that it is able to mutate very quickly. This particular coronavirus does not seem to mutate as much, although I have to tell you, I'm not a virologist, but that's my understanding. However, we certainly have seen mutations, there is no question. The fact that we have this new vaccine technology that can be changed relatively quickly to give something that's efficacious, or that's at least what we're being advised, the mRNA type vaccines, means that we have the ability perhaps to be a step ahead of this particular virus. So I'm hoping we will be able to get it really well under control. To say we can eliminate it is something that I can't say with confidence. We have been trying, for example, to eliminate polio for decades. We have almost got rid of it around the world, but it remains present in, I think, 3 countries in the world. So there are things we have not been able to get rid of, and there are things that we currently control with vaccinations. Polio, measles. We control it because they're so infectious, they manage to stay alive. We don't vaccinate enough people, but we control it and we live with it quite successfully. It could well be that we come to a stage where we live with this coronavirus quite successfully, but we need to continue to take active measures, for example, vaccinations, in order to keep it at bay.
The island depends heavily on tourism. So, it's going to be people coming from all over the world here, with this virus that's going around. I protected myself and most of all, my family, my friends, the people around me. I'm a young Caymanian water sports operator. That's my bread and butter. That's where I make my living. I beg you, please, to go out there, get vaccinated so borders can reopen as soon as possible and we all can get back to work.
The COVID-19 pandemic is affecting everything from forest cover and marine pollution to the behavior of wildlife, but most of all, of people. Me, you. After Hurricane Ivan, Caymanians discovered we are vulnerable to calamities we thought only happened elsewhere. We were reminded then, as we are being reminded now, that we are resilient. We are powerful. We are community-minded, Cayman-kind. For the people of the Cayman Islands, moments of crisis also present opportunity. We are the narrators. You are the catalyst for change. We You are responsible. This is not just our pandemic story, but it is the story of how 3 tiny islands came together to change course in uncharted waters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's press briefing. I'm Donna Bush. I'm so glad you could join us here today on our various channels, as well as live on Radio Cayman. We begin with a prayer from Pastor Torrance Bob.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father and our God, we thank you that as we prepare for this press briefing, that we can come to you. Please guide, O God, all of the presenters, all of the participants. We thank you for the relative normalcy that we have enjoyed here in the Cayman Islands during this global pandemic. We thank you, O God, that down through the centuries, you have enlightened men with wisdom so that life could be saved and preserved. We do thank you for the wisdom and direction that you have given to our government in guiding us through this challenging period. May our residents have a spirit of cooperation regarding the vaccine and the other measures that have been put in place to protect and preserve life. We do thank you, O God, for the protection that you afforded us during this last hurricane, and we ask for your continued protection for the rest of the season. Grant wisdom and direction to our governor, our premier health minister. Father, please enable and enlighten all those you have placed in authority over us to govern the Cayman Islands. And may all of us be submissive to you and to your word, which you have given to guide us. And so, Father, please guide and direct in these press briefings. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. God bless you.
Our panelists today, His Excellency Governor Martin Roper, Premier the Honorable Wayne Panton, Minister for Health, the Honorable Sabrina Turner, Minister for Tourism, the Honorable Kenneth Bryan, Minister for Education, the Honorable Juliana O'Connor-Connolly, and Dr. Colin Charles. In studio with us are the medical officer of health, members of the media, invited guests, as well as our sign language interpreter, Miss Carolyn Powell. We go first to our Honorable Premier.
Thank you very much, Donna, and let me extend a very warm welcome to everyone who is present, members of the press, and those who are viewing and listening to this press briefing. Thank you very much for your interest. And good afternoon. I want to speak to you today, not only as Premier of the country, but as a son of the soil, who is deeply concerned about our people, about our country, and about all those who call these shores home. Frankly, I am deeply concerned as to the potential unnecessary loss of life because some in our community still refuse to take the vaccination, which remains one of the most effective tools we have to protect ourselves from the ill effects of the virus, which causes the disease known as COVID-19. I do understand that there is a segment of our community that cannot take the vaccine for a variety of reasons, even religious ones. But for the rest, there is not really any excuse. I want to recognize that we accept that our people have the right to have the views that they have. We don't want to say that we are going to disrespect those views. And one thing is for certain, we don't want to be in a position where We want this issue to be divisive for the country. But I want to say that notwithstanding that, we are going to, as a government, continue to promote the uptake of the vaccine. And as people continue to resist vaccination, I want to say that you're putting yourselves, your families, your neighbors, and indeed our entire country at risk. And I don't think that is right. I've heard a myriad of excuses from people who do not want to take the vaccine, that there are long-term effects, that the vaccine contains computer chips, that people have died, that people have had to have organ transplants, emergency surgery. Ladies and gentlemen, all of these are myths and lies designed to scare you and carry out an anti-vaccination agenda. If any of that was true, the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, would not have given the Pfizer vaccination full approval on Monday. That's the safe and highly effective vaccine that the United Kingdom has provided to us for free, and that our Health Services Administration has been administering since January. Another excuse that I've heard for not taking the vaccine is that government is waffling, that it is not giving a solid date as to when the borders will reopen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think most people should be familiar with our reopening plan. And the relevant date there is October 14th. That is the date that this government has set to remove all quarantine requirements, essentially reopening our borders. That is what I call our C day, the day or the date that the risk that COVID will become a reality in our country significantly ratchets up. That is the date that we stop relying on our very effective and protective testing and quarantine mechanisms and start relying on the vaccine to keep us safe from serious illness and death. That is the date that those of you who have not been vaccinated will be at an exponentially increasing risk of being in close contact with someone who is carrying COVID. That is the date when there will be the chance that you cross paths with that COVID carrying visitor at the supermarket, the liquor store, the hardware store, or any restaurant or church, anywhere really. And that you may become infected and, God forbid, take the virus home to your unvaccinated children, grandchildren, at-risk parents, or grandparents. Do you really want to be perceived as being that irresponsible? COVID, ladies and gentlemen, is real, and it is going to be very likely to be present when we open our borders. And we have to understand that community transmission of COVID, which we have been able to successfully limit with the measures we have had in place, will be a much greater possibility. In relation to the vaccine, is it safe? Undoubtedly, yes. Is it guaranteed to prevent infection? No. Is it the best possible protection that we have available to us? Absolutely. So we have the opportunity now to protect ourselves, our families, and our community. What I'm asking you to do, again, as your premier and a son of the soil who loves his people, his country, and those who call Cayman home, is to get vaccinated. We plan to move the requirement for the 80% vaccination target from the 9th of September to the 14th of October. As of today, about 72% of our estimated population of 71,106 people have received their first jab, and about 69% have had both doses. I know that there has been some confusion about population statistics. So using the population figure of 65,786 released by the Economics and Statistics Office last week, close to 78% have received the first shot, and about 75% have received the second. Let me just say, ladies and gentlemen, in relation to that, with the Delta variant, this notion of a target for vaccination is becoming more and more difficult to maintain. It is something that we really need to be seeking to maximize in terms of vaccine distribution and take up, because the Delta variant, as has been indicated fairly recently, has a very high rate of contagion. Its transmissibility is very similar to measles or chickenpox, and we need to have as many people as possible vaccinated. This is a very serious situation that the world is facing. There is the potential for even greater variants with worse transmissibility potential. But this one in particular is something that we have to deal with, and we have to recognize is a very significant risk for us. We will still go into phase 3 of our reopening on the 9th of September, accepting all fully vaccinated visitors who will still have to quarantine during this slow season. This will help government and the tourism sector develop capacity for dealing with larger volumes of travelers in preparation for high season. But if we want to stick to the 14th of October date of opening with no quarantine, we need to be ready to accept visitors, ready to expect COVID, and ready to manage it safely. Remember that we have had no community spread of the virus for well over a year. So we will not have much natural immunity from infections, making vaccinations all the more crucial. In my heart of hearts, all isn't doom and gloom yet. We still have time. I believe we can work together to get the 80% vaccination ratio by October, or hopefully even exceed it. The target that we have set, we believe, based on the scientific evidence, will help us have the best chance of limiting community transmission and the most devastating impacts of COVID. I calculate, working backwards from the 14th of October, that those who have not yet been vaccinated need to get their first shot by no later than the 9th of September. That will give them 5 weeks to reach that would give us, 5 weeks to reach the 80% vaccination rate before we remove the quarantine requirements. You will see on your screen a graphic which indicates the 9th of September date being the first date for the jab, the 30th of September being the date for the second, and then the 14th of October, all of which will take 5 weeks. Moving the 80% requirement to October has been provisionally approved by government, and we will finalize the changes to the reopening plan in cabinet subsequently. But I want to emphasize that you can and should still take the vaccine anytime between today and the 9th of September. People ask for a go-to date or a target date. Well, that's it. That's it. October 14th is the target date that we are going to effectively be dropping the quarantine, and that's when the risk that we have infected people in the country and the possibility of COVID returning to Cayman in place. This afternoon, you will hear from other ministers about the sort of nuts and bolts of reopening. But I want to appeal to you as a person who cares and a man who cares deeply about our people, our country, and our residents. Last week, a college roommate of a friend of mine died from COVID because he didn't take the vaccination in the US. He couldn't get vaccinated because of underlying medical conditions. But his family did take the vaccine because they didn't want to expose him to the virus. Despite all their precautions, he caught it. He could have picked it up at the grocery store, at the pharmacy, any restaurant, or wherever he traveled in his hometown, because someone he came into contact with had the virus. Following his funeral, his daughter posted the following on Facebook. After COVID-19 killed my dad, I felt so much anger. To those with healthy immune systems that didn't get vaccinated, you make me sick. Every time I see people running around Madison indoors without masks, I want to scream. People with hematologic issues can't get vaccinated. Young children can't get vaccinated. For all these people who claim to care about the sanctity of life, you sure have a funny way of showing it. I got the vaccine to protect myself, my family, and my community from the destruction of this virus. I didn't wish this level of grief upon anyone else. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't honestly want to see a post like that from anyone in Cayman. While I don't know the daughter who made the post, I know my friend who lost someone to the virus. And I know our heart hurts. I don't want our hearts to be hurting. I don't want to go to the funeral of anyone who has died because of COVID. But we know we're taking risks with the opening of our borders. Government continues to make decisions based on the best available information and scientific evidence and advice. But we are also cognizant that we simply cannot afford to keep our borders closed indefinitely. Like so many things in life, we're trying to strike the right balance. Being aware of the risks that we're taking with the decisions that we're making, but also making sure that we are doing everything we can to limit and mitigate those risks and their potential impacts. I think, ladies and gentlemen, we only need to look at our fellow British Overseas Territory, the BVI, as an example of how things can go wrong and why we need to be very careful, and we need to maximize the tools, the employment of the tools that we have available to us, which is maximizing the uptake of the vaccine. From the start of COVID until I think about June or the end of June or the beginning of July, they had one COVID death. Since then, they have had 36 COVID deaths. So when the Premier in BVI says that he has suffered immeasurable grief because so many of the people that died he knew personally, I certainly don't envy him in his position, and I don't want to be in that situation. So we need to be extremely careful and manage this as best as we can, and utilize the tools that are available to us, which is getting as much people vaccinated who are eligible to as possible. We have just come through a rough time with the passage of Tropical Storm Grace / Hurricane Grace. Some will argue that it was definitely hurricane force winds. Not going to argue about that. But just as after Ivan and Paloma, we have pulled together and we've cleaned up our yards and are working and cleaning up our yards in our communities. We're restoring our islands together. And it is what we do when we're faced with a disaster. It's now time for us to pull together because we're getting to that point where we need to stop another impending possible disaster by getting vaccinated, encouraging our family and friends to get vaccinated, to utilize the one tool that we know is available to us. We are a people known for caring for each other. In times past, our forefathers and mothers survived by working together side by side and sharing their provisions. We still do it to some extent. After the passage of grace, we shared the breadfruits, the mangoes and pears that had been blown to the ground, often swapping one for the other or just taking our bounty to friends, family, and neighbors. I'm asking that we show that care for each other now by getting vaccinated. Please, ladies and gentlemen, stop listening to the false news, the propaganda of those who perhaps wish you ill will or whatever their particular agenda is. Certainly not something that seems constructive at the end of the day. We have 8,765 doses of the vaccine that are set to expire at the end of October. There are 2,000 people left to take their second shot, so that leaves us a little more than 6,000 doses for first jabs, or 3,000 persons if we were to have both, have them all double jabbed. If the United Kingdom sees that we have used the vaccine they have given us for free, they will, I'm sure, and the government can confirm, hopefully, supply more for additional injections and eventual boosters. If we don't use our vaccine supply, it is not impossible that there may be a reconsideration of that generosity. If that occurs, that will mean that you may have to pay for your own vaccination. If, for example, private businesses consider a move to ensure that their employees and vendors delivering their goods are vaccinated, and also as government insists that work permit holders and those who renew work permits are fully vaccinated before working on our shores. It is to those businesses that I turn my attention. We strongly encourage the private sector to take all appropriate steps to urge their staff to become fully vaccinated. And we fully support such an approach by the private sector. I appreciate those that have educated their staff and supported and encouraged them to get vaccinated. Now that the Pfizer vaccine has been given FDA approval, I suspect there'll be a renewed appreciation for the need to protect staff and vendors that supply your goods and services in your physical premises. And I, again, welcome and support the actions many of you propose to protect your staff and your businesses. I'm also asking everyone in the private sector to help us appeal to get the majority of our people and residents vaccinated before the 14th of October. Use your channels, you get creative, use whatever measures you have available and communication measures you have available to you, because government cannot do it alone. I am, ladies and gentlemen, I should say, puzzled and perplexed as to why people who are intelligent and caring and full of common sense would rely on or believe so much of the misinformation on social media and platforms like YouTube, rather than taking the advice of our own doctors who specialize in public health or the advice of their private doctors. I understand if you're afraid, but I would suggest that you do not need to be. We've had in excess of 51,000 people in Cayman take the vaccine, including 100% of our elected government. And we have had no person admitted to hospital for any side effects. Yes, like any other vaccine and most medicines, there are potential side effects. These can include pain, redness, and swelling at the injection site, fatigue, headache, muscle pain, joint pain, chills, and fever. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that you won't have any side effects. That would be a lie. I can tell you personally, I experienced a few hours of fatigue and low-grade fever after my second shot. Although many people haven't experienced any of those issues. If you do experience side effects, Tylenol or a similar over-the-counter analgesic and rest will help. Many side effects are gone within 24 hours. Pfizer and the FDA are aware of the side effects, but the FDA also approves the efficacy of the vaccine. When COVID-19 broke out last year, the favorite mantra across the globe was that we were in this together. We now need to come together again and get vaccinated to survive together as a people. If we don't, I am afraid the consequences may be dire, and like our friends in the BVI, we may have unnecessary funerals and possibly an overwhelming of our healthcare system. We're seeing this happen around the world in places where the vaccine uptake has been low. I want to thank everyone who has already done the right thing and taken their COVID vaccination. Thank you for playing your part in protecting our community. For those of you who can get vaccinated but have not yet done so, I implore you to not let the opportunity pass to protect yourself, your family, your friends, and your community. Do not let that opportunity pass you by. Step up, get the vaccine, and help give the Cayman Islands the best chance for a safe reopening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Premier Panton. We now go to His Excellency.
Thank you very much, Donna, and good afternoon, everybody. Really nice to be with you all again. I do want to acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Governor, who is with us as well, who's chairing the Programme Board, which is doing a huge amount of work behind the scenes, managing the civil service response to this pandemic. I just want to say to start with, we're 4 months into the new government, so I've been working incredibly closely with Premier Panton. We've established a really strong and close relationship, and I've established equally good relationships with ministers and parliamentary secretaries and his team. And I know from all the discussions internally just how much care, attention and effort is being placed on handling this pandemic by the government. And I've seen that up hand and want to underline it. And it's a heavy burden. It's a heavy burden of responsibility to be managing this really difficult, complex reopening plan. And I know the whole community will join me in supporting them and thanking them as they move forward and take some decisions. And just to first pick up on the point about vaccines, and the Premier has covered it, we do have sufficient left to vaccinate about 3,000 new people. And if we can use those, we will be able to get more vaccines in there is a weekly BA flight in September, so I don't envisage any problem in getting more in. But if we cannot use those vaccines, and we of course we can't send them anywhere else because of the cold storage, we can't send them to another country. So if we don't use them, they would be wasted. My message to Cayman, please, Cayman, let us not be in that position. Let us not waste this incredibly precious resource, which people around the world are desperate to get their hands on. So I really do hope that we see a significant uptake in people coming forward for this vaccine. And I know the Premier shares that view as well. So the dates for the next 2 phases of our border reopening are approaching, as the Premier has outlined, 9 September and 14 October. And I strongly support this renewed effort to get more people to come forward to take the vaccine. We are doing extremely well internationally. We're up there amongst the top 6 or 7 countries in the world for vaccine uptake. But because of Delta, it's so incredibly infectious. As the Premier has said, we need to go further so we can have some confidence that our level of vaccination rates will protect us. But to have even more confidence, we need more people to get the vaccine. And put simply, the more people we vaccinate, the more lives we will save. So I fully support what the Premier has just said about having those very clear dates in mind. But no matter how slowly and carefully we reopen our borders, it is a simple fact that COVID will return to our islands. New Zealand is showing that very clearly now. But government here has a reopening plan which will allow us to move forward carefully and cautiously manage risks as we go forward. And I agree that we can't stay locked up forever. Too many people out there are hurting. And the vaccine is the best tool we have to protect our community. But there are other measures we can also put in place around masks, social distancing, and more testing to protect the community as we move forward. And we do know that the Pfizer vaccine, probably one of the most effective vaccines there is out there, 90% effective in preventing hospitalizations. And if you can still contract the virus if vaccinated, but it's much less likely that you will become seriously ill or die. But if you are unvaccinated, for many people, your natural immunity will not be enough to fight off this nasty virus. The vaccine boosts your immunity and helps your body fight it if you are infected. And I won't say more on the sort of FDA's decision for full approval. Clearly a very welcome step, and I hope it provides confidence and reassurance for more people here to come forward and get the vaccine. And just a word to support what the Premier said on side effects. We've looked at some data from the UK, which I think is really powerful. Very few people in the UK experience side effects from having the vaccine. Only between 3 and 7 people in every 1,000 people have reported any side effects. And the vast majority are the sort of soreness in your arm, very sort of minor symptoms. So again, you look around the world now, and 5 billion doses of this vaccine have been given out. So this is a safe, effective vaccine. So please do get it. I just want to say a brief word on boosters. So it's now almost 8 months since vaccine rollout started in Cayman. I was one of the first back in January, on January the 7th, to get the vaccine. And I know that many people who got the vaccine early will be wondering if and when they might need a booster shot. Now, the UK's Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency has been assessing evidence for boosters and the best vaccine to use for boosters. We expect it to report in about 10 days. The UK government will use that report to finalise its plans for a booster rollout. It may initially only be for highly vulnerable groups, but we can expect whatever programme is rolled out in the UK to be put in place also for Cayman. Now, immunity does seem to wane somewhat with the Pfizer vaccine, which appears to increase the risk of mild COVID infection in those vaccinated. But there is no evidence that the waning immunity causes serious illness or death. And I think if there was evidence, the UK would be moving much faster to a rollout of boosters than it is. So I think we can take comfort from that. So the Pfizer vaccine is still extremely effective at preventing serious illness and death, even for those who got it at the very beginning of our programme. So there's no need to be overly concerned about boosters, and we are getting some concerns expressed by members of the public. We still have time, and I do expect us to be part of a booster rollout in September, which will be well before the key date that the Premier has highlighted of 14 October. So just to conclude, we are now on a path to reopen the border, and we have clear timelines and dates and clear policies to manage the risks as we move forward. There's a major prize within our grasp to be able to open up without having to go back into lockdown, as so many other countries have had to do. And because our vaccine uptake is already high and could go higher, that prize really is within our grasp if the community rallies round and takes the vaccine. So please do come forward and take it when you can. Thank you.
Minister of Health.
Good evening, and thank you, Donna. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Excuse my voice, out working, and no thanks to Grace. You've been aware in a press release released by the Ministry of Health and Wellness earlier this week, and you've heard it here before, our Premier and the Deputy and the Governor, of the United States Food and Drug Administration, that's FDA approval of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Now, this is further good news, as this approval fully demonstrates the confidence of the FDA in the high standards for safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing quality of this vaccine that we've been so blessed to have from the get-go. I do hope that with this full FDA approval, that this will reinforce the public's confidence in the safety, efficacy of the vaccine for you, our Cayman Islands, as a whole. Now, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, this is proven to continue to provide excellent protection against serious illness and death. And if we look back pretty much a year ago, and ever would have thought that we would have a vaccine that does this, we would have been more relieved and thankful. Now that we have such vaccines that are available, I would like to really implore each and every one of us to take advantage of this protection, as you know, as we even consider, and given here today for the 14th of October, begin to reopen our borders. Now, it is understood that vaccines are the best way of dealing with this pandemic, and definitely with this virus. And we know that in time, the effects may wane, but at the moment, we're beginning to see where its protection is against the infection. but against serious illnesses and death remains a huge threat. So also here today with us at the end of this briefing, should there be any questions, we have public health officials who will be better able to speak to some of the effects which persons have voiced after taking the vaccine. However, I have been reliably informed that we have not had any cases where there has been any admissions to the hospital or deaths as a result of vaccine, bearing in mind the difficulty of proving cause and effect. Now, we're eagerly also awaiting the release of key studies, as so stated here by Our Excellency the Governor, how to best use boosters before this technical advice can be shared. But as we've been said before, we have been reassured by the Foreign and Commonwealth and the Development Office that we will be able to access boosters appropriately for those to determine to be the most groups that will be affected by this. Again, I would like to reiterate that our best protection as a community as a whole for all of those who are eligible in their age groups to take up the vaccine, go and get vaccinated. This is the best defense that you have, as we are so able now to give a definitive date, which for many weeks, that's what the public has been asking. When is the opening date? I therefore urge everyone to come forward and be vaccinated against the COVID-19. Also today, I want to remind persons that you can go and sign up to access their COVID-19 vaccination records digitally on the My HSA patient portal. This will allow persons to have access to their immunization records on a secure platform from anywhere with internet connection. All you have to do is to visit the HSA website on hsa.ky for more information on how you can sign up. I would like to also stress that in our efforts in increasing the access of vaccines, we as a government have decided earlier this morning is that we're going to be able to offer it in our various constituency offices throughout the islands, where you get your wellness checks and you'll have access to the vaccines. This Thursday is slated for the Savannah Newlands area from 4 to 7. And next on the 2nd, we'll be back in the Prospect at 33 Marina Drive, also from 4 to 7. And we also are planning, and more details to this regard will be forthcoming, a vaccine that is we're going to take a bus and go throughout the islands. We're going to do a road show starting from West Bay, and we're going to even take it over there to the sister island, Cayman Islands, where we start in the evenings with a bus, work with the elected officials for each constituency, and each day we will be coming to your area, and we'll be using all social media platforms in our efforts to make this possible. I want to thank the HSA staff, public health officials for making this event possible, and that will kick off for the week of the 6th of September. Finally, I want to thank and encourage our community to continue to work together to keep our island safe. None of this success is possible without you. The health and safety of our island remain the top priority for our government. And I can assure you, as Minister of Health and Wellness, we will do everything in our power to put people's safety first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Turner. We now go to the Minister for Tourism, the Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Thank you, Donna, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today to hear the latest news and information in respect to our reopening plans and our vaccine uptake. Today, I'll be providing you with some tourism updates related to the new stipend applications and the ongoing registration at work. That's work with a C. But I first would like to share some relevant COVID-related information with you, as my colleagues and the Honorable Governor has done. Many of you may be following the international news broadcasts and will be aware of the continued rise of COVID infections rates across the world, particularly those in Florida, our closest U.S. hub, and Jamaica, our closest neighboring island. Florida is going through their third wave and have recorded 150,000 new positive cases just last week. Although Florida has a vaccination rate of 66%, reports from the Jackson Memorial Hospital indicate that 96% of their patients hospitalized are due to COVID are those who are unvaccinated. Again, I say 96% of them are unvaccinated. Last week, Florida recorded another 1,486 death fatalities due to COVID, bringing their total number of deaths to 42,252. Jamaica is also facing a third wave of infections and is currently enduring another series of lockdowns. This past Sunday, Jamaica recorded 879 new COVID infections, which is their highest daily total in a single 24-hour period. They currently have over 550 people hospitalized and more than 1,400 people who have already died. According to their chief medical officer, the infection rate is soaring among persons 18 to 36, rising from 37% of the total cases in March and April to a whopping 43%. That's an increase by 6% over those months and in their current third wave. Just yesterday, the UK announced that they'll be placing Jamaica on their red list. This means that all travel from Jamaica to the UK will be banned. Only those who have the right to reside in the UK can return, but they must quarantine in a government-approved hotel for at least 11 days. The question is, why am I telling you this? Because Florida and Jamaica are two destinations in particular where most of our visitors travel through and where many of our residents travel to. As hard as it has been to keep our borders closed over the last 18 months, it's given us an opportunity to observe the experiences of others and to put the knowledge into practice so that we can avoid the situations that are happening in Florida and in Jamaica as they go through their waves. All around the region, countries are facing same outcomes and consequences, and consequently, the UK has also placed St. Lucia, Antigua, and Dominica on their red list. Judging by the scores in similar examples worldwide, the Cayman Islands would be wise to learn from what's going on around us. We should be resolved to doing everything that we can within our means to avoid following the same path. And we should trust the guidance of our medical professionals and the Minister for Health and Wellness. Turning our attention now to the reopening of our borders, the Ministry and Department of Tourism continue to work hard in preparing for Phase 3 and the government's reopening plan. As a reminder, and as you heard before, Phase 3 begins on the 15th, 15 days from today, the 9th of September, and paves the way for a limited introduction to tourism. Apologies. On the other hand, I'm very pleased that we have been safely reached this point. And I, like everyone in the tourism industry, are looking forward to receiving tourists back to our shores. But on the other hand, I'm deeply concerned by the reluctance of some within our community to protect themselves from the virus and its variants. This is troubling to me because the fact is we cannot stop COVID from entering our shores one day in the future once we reopen our borders. And I'm not sure if everyone fully understands this. I am particularly concerned for many people in the tourism industry because tourism workers and frontline staff have a lot more contact with visitors on a regular basis. This is why it is so important for them to be vaccinated, because if they're not, they're basically putting their lives and the lives of their people and loved ones at risk. There's no need to put our people's lives at risk. I am therefore appealing once again to all of our partners, stakeholders, and workers within the tourism industry. Please get vaccinated. Protect yourselves, your colleagues, and our industry, so together we can keep our country from avoiding the same kind of infection rates and tragic loss to life that we are witnessing across the world. Turning our attention now to the stipend payments. The Ministry of Tourism recently reopened the stipend registration period to give tourism workers the chance to submit an application if they have not done so already. A total of 442 new applications were received. Stipend is intended to provide financial relief to workers, tourism workers, and I'm keen to ensure that persons who qualify and are in need of this support have the opportunity to receive it. But before the applications can be approved, the information provided to the ministry has to be verified. We need to ensure that the applicants meet the specific criteria, i.e., that they are Caymanian or permanent resident or married to a Caymanian, and that they were working within the tourism sector at the time the pandemic began. With 442 new applications in the pipeline, the verification process is unfortunately taking a little while longer than anticipated for a number of reasons. My staff are working diligently on it and are expected to complete it by mid-September. The payments to all newly approved applicants will be backdated to cover the 3-month period from July to September 2021 and will be paid on a monthly basis moving forward. I'm very aware that our tourism workers depend on the stipend support, and I would like to assure them and all the new applicants who will receive approval that we're doing all that we can to issue the payments as soon as possible. In the meantime, I sincerely apologize for the delay and want to publicly thank all of the new applicants for their patience. I'm asking you to please bear with us just a little while longer. Most importantly, if you received an email or a voicemail from the Department of Tourism, please be sure to respond, as it will also help us to speed up the verification process. Still on the subject of tourism workers, as the Minister of Tourism, one of my top priorities is to ensure that Caymanians are given the necessary priority, training, and opportunity to take up the suitable roles within the tourism product. To achieve that objective, it is absolutely vital that we have the relevant data to support and inform our decision-making. I therefore would like to remind and encourage all displaced tourism workers who have not already registered with Work with a C to please do so before the deadline ends on Tuesday, the 31st of this month. To date, a total of 1,712 persons have registered, not including the 442 new applicants for stipends. And of these, 473 have previously been registered with Work. 641 have confirmed that they would like assistance to find work, and 598 people have stated that they do not require any assistance to secure work, most likely be an entrepreneur who has their own business. The data tells us that there are still a lot of people, 1,075 persons, who have not yet registered. I'll say that again, 1,075 persons who have not yet registered. I don't know what the reason is, but you should be registered by the end of this month. If anyone needs any help with the registration process, the representatives of Work will be at the Westin Hotel Galleon Ballroom tomorrow, Thursday, the 26th of August, from 1 to 5 p.m. and on Friday, the 27th of August, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. You will need to bring your government-issued ID, a resume, and proof of your immigration status. To find out more about about our other sessions during the month of September, or to contact Work directly, you can call 945-9672 or visit their website at work.gov.ky. My final update has to do with the return of our commercial air services. After 18 months of international commercial flights to our islands, sorry, my apologies, after 18 months without international commercial flights to our islands, the Ministry and the Department of Tourism is in discussions with airline partners to prepare the return to our lovely country. We're currently working in collaborations with the Airport Authority and other relevant entities to safely schedule and manage the resumption of commercial air services to our destination. To date, aside from Cayman Airways, we have 5 major international airlines have confirmed that they will resume air service to Cayman, with more to come. This is very encouraging, and talks are ongoing regarding specific dates that commercial services will return. I will provide further updates when the schedule has been finalized. The resumption of commercial flights is exciting news that signals the restart of our tourism and the return to normalcy within our industry. More importantly, the return of our tourism will bring jobs and opportunities back to thousands of workers who have patiently waited a long time for this to come. The Ministry and the Department of Tourism are engaged in a variety of activities to ensure that the phased border opening takes place safely, smoothly, efficiently as possible. I look forward to sharing more details with the public as soon as I can confirm them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Bryan. We now go to the Honourable Minister for Education, Ms. Juliana O'Connor-Connolly.
Thank you, Donna, and good afternoon to all. I perhaps want to commence my remarks by referring to a post that was quoted by my good friend, the Honorable Alex Boyd, Knight of Dominica. And she said as follows: "My people, discernment comes when one realizes that, first of all, there is a difference between fact and opinion. And secondly, one cannot have an opinion on whether a fact is true or false. It is a fact that the Honorable Premier came to my office yesterday and asked if I would come and lend my voice, whatever contribution that can make to the nation, to try to encourage all of our people to see the significance and the importance of becoming vaccinated. It is a fact that I was a late convert and that I too had my concerns about the side effects and my own medical issues. It is a fact that I consulted my 3 medical doctors, one of whom is here today, and I shan't call his name, and they all gave me the green light to go ahead. In fact, went beyond that and encouraged me to go. It is a fact that that was not sufficient, because I am an avid reader, as most people probably realize by now. And so I too surfed the internet, the social media, but I always made an attempt to apply what I termed as the peeling away concept. And for you to better perhaps wrap your minds around that, just conceptualize in your mind an orange and the skin being what you probably see on just your regular social media. Well, I went beyond that. I went into the core to try to find the seeds of the fact, so that I would have that opportunity from my own personal perspective to dissect and bisect, and through the process of analytical thinking with whatever intellectual capacity that the Lord bestowed upon me, and from speaking to others, to see what was in the best interest. So it is a fact that, yes, even persons who have degrees, sometimes more than one, takes time to exercise their constitutional right of what is best. It is my opinion that it should not have taken me 18 months. But I'm comforted that after today, there won't be any more 18-month plus, that persons would have listened, that persons would have received with an element of gratitude, that the government, the entire government, inclusive of the opposition and the civil service, that are medical personnel, that all and sundry who care and love this country and who care and love these people will now come to that juncture in your decision-making process that it's time for you, no one else. The responsibility lays firmly and securely and flatly at your feet to make that decision that now is the right time. Why now? Because we have heard so ably articulated and conveyed to our nation just now by the Honorable Premier and by the associated panelists that we have to reopen the country because we are a government that have said across all of the 19 constituencies of this jurisdiction that community builds country. We are hell-bent to ensure that the modus operandi is that we are going into our communities and we are going to spread the message. It is a fact when you have taken the first jab. It is also a fact when you've taken the second jab. And I can tell you that last Friday, I took my second jab. I took a bit of coaxing by the Premier. And it wasn't because I was afraid, as I said yesterday, because very few things make me afraid, perhaps only one God. But it was that human element. He did not have to, as I indicated. Yes, perhaps it would have been very helpful because he was for the first time today able to say that the entire elected government is now vaccinated. But that in itself would not have changed or resolved. I had to make that decision myself. But it is a fact that after all of the facts have been duly and properly and adequately disseminated to our various constituencies, if we extend that hand of care, not just by putting it on a Facebook post or putting nice PR out, yes, that is auxiliary and it will help. But when he came after a cabinet meeting in this same building, when all of our colleagues had left, and we sat down and got face to face and eyeball to eyeball, which I quite adhere to the concept because it does reveal what's in the heart. And he said, you know, I care about you. I knew that, otherwise he probably would not have invited a non-starter from another party into his government. But he did. And he continued to share personal family situations, as we both, even until today, have members of our family who have not yet chosen to be vaccinated. But one thing I can say, it is a fact that although my journey took me 18 plus months to make that final step, I never once discouraged any member of my family not to get vaccinated. And so it is a fact that if we are going to make this upward trajectory to 80% and or beyond, we ourselves who have now been vaccinated take it upon ourselves to become true Cayman ambassadors and go to everyone we meet. And I like to sometimes convey that everyone in the concept of the Donahue and Stevenson case where Lord Stevenson said, who is my neighbor? And in fact, he went on to say in that historic case, my neighbor is everyone I come in contact with. So what that does, it puts the onus upon you and I to remove those fences, whether it was social or psychological or financial, or you just didn't like them because their last name or because they came from Philippines or Jamaica. They're human beings. Some of us have the privilege of calling Cayman our domicile of origin because we were actually born here and had generations of parents that gave us that privilege. But equally, we have persons among us who have chosen this domicile as their domicile of choice. So out of many, as our Jamaican neighbors say, we are one. This is indeed everybody's business. I know that we have data protection legislation. So even us as parliamentarians don't have access to have been vaccinated. But indeed, we are creative. Otherwise, we would not be on the global financial envy stage. We have made it successfully thus far, and we can still be that example to the rest of the world. When I look at the situation of Israel and the 70+ % of persons haven't been vaccinated, yes, they still are now looking at some 95% that are contracting COVID. But the fact is, I have not yet found, and I stand to be corrected, anyone in Cayman who has died because of the vaccination. The fact is, the boundaries are going to open. The fact is, there'll be a new import, and it's called COVID. The fact is, COVID kills. The fact is, my very best friend, Ingrid, who worked as a civil servant on my beloved island of Cayman, retired, went to Jamaica, built a beautiful home at the very top of a mountain, and hardly had the time to enjoy her pension or her retirement. When she took sick for another reason, traveled back to Cayman, because yes, we do have good medical services in Cayman, despite what some people say, and only to discover within days, I got the phone call, Juju, tell your aunt and your mother, don't play with COVID, go and get vaccinated. And I could hear the difference in her breathing on the WhatsApp message. The next call I got from her, I could definitely hear that Ingrid was in trouble. She asked me to pray for her. I called back and I couldn't get her, but I still prayed in a WhatsApp message and sent to Ingrid. That's the last communication I've had with Ingrid. And if you don't know the emotional turmoil that is, when I live just a matter of a short 5-minute drive to Georgetown, HSA, but yet I couldn't visit Ingrid. I could not be at Ingrid's bedside to hold her hand for her to safely go from this world to where time has no constraints. I could not even communicate to her. That is a fact. And unless we take this serious, Caymanians and residents alike, and discern between opinion and fact, the fact is that will not be the last best friend or family member. But we, especially as politicians, who are called upon to read obituaries and tribute, sometimes to finance funerals, the fact is we will be pulling out our black suits, our navy blue suits, or whatever color, and have that very dark, lonesome, painful, emotional ride. If we have that privilege, because she had to be cremated, and I was asked to read her obituary at Barton's funeral home. So I can tell you what it is. I've walked those 1,000 miles. And so, Honorable Premier, I will be eternally grateful for you for whatever reason that inspired you that late afternoon to take a vested interest in me. So now it is my duty and my responsibility, even though I don't like this type of setting, and I'm quite a private person. It's not about me or my personal feelings. It's about this country I love, the people I love, my students, my teachers, my staff. Hence the reason I accepted the invitation, not in my constitutional capacity as Minister of Education, District Administration of Lands, but in my capacity as a human being and as a way to convey my gratitude for the time he took in me. I felt the least I could do was to come and lend support today. The story doesn't end there. Back in 1979, when Kay King, and some of you in this room, I know who she is, the daughter of the late Reverend King, who did so very much from an infrastructural perspective on the island of Cayman. She crowned me in 1979 as a Miss Teen. She was the outgoing Miss Teen, 1978. I got a message from her just about 3 or 4 days ago from Alabama, where she's a teacher, and she is now lying, fighting for her life from COVID. The fact is, COVID is real. The fact is, vaccination will not prevent you from getting it or being a carrier of it. But the fact is, unless proved otherwise, will prevent the severity of the disease, it will prevent the death, and it is totally unfair and ungratifying to our medical staff who has been as superheroes and on the front line protecting those. They have conveyed their scientific knowledge to us to the best of their abilities. It's up to us, Cayman. And by that, I mean everyone who lives and breathes and have their being here, go and get vaccinated so that we can post 100% of our people are vaccinated. And yes, COVID can come, the variants can mutate, but we would be as prepared as scientific knowledge gives us that preparation. We've done it before, and yes, we can do it yet again. That is a fact. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Connolly. We now go to Dr. Collins.
Your Excellency, distinguished panel of honorable ministers, I just first like to just take the moment to just thank our honorable Minister O'Connor for sharing her experience. I'm very moved by what you just said, by your experience, and it resonates very deeply with me. The realities of COVID extend and affect every facet of our life. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here to share my experience contracting the COVID virus and experiencing the horrors as well as the humanity of that journey. I'm grateful to be alive, to tell the tale. I'm grateful to breathe. Something as simple as a breath. So simple, so important, yet so precious. Like many things that are of high value and worthwhile, we don't fully appreciate it until it's gone. In March of this year, while contracting COVID, my breath was almost stolen by that virus. March of this year, I was finishing my final year of specialty training in Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica. And in March 14th, I visited family as I usually would. My little cousin, 14-year-old cousin in particular, who enjoys it when I visit at least once a week. And while I was there on the 14th of March, I started experiencing subtle symptoms, just a little stuffy nose. But things progressed very rapidly within the following 4 days. What started as a stuffy nose progressed to a productive cough. And that progressed into generalized weakness and fatigue, muscle aches. And before you know it, I had a fever and had labored breathing. I went to the hospital for which I was working in the front lines of that hospital for the last year, over the last year, going through my usual protective routine of wearing the necessary PPE, and felt very comfortable and confident that whatever protective routine I had was sufficient and effective. I mean, by all accounts, it worked for at least a year. However, when I went to the hospital and got my COVID test done, which was an antigen test, it came back positive. And a PCR test was done, and I was sent home. That very evening, my breathing became so labored, I had to return to the hospital. I was admitted for 2 days. While there, I experienced symptoms of shortness of breath. My oxygen saturations fell as low as 78. My heart rate, I became tachycardic, increased. Symptom-wise, I was extremely weak. I had vomiting, and more importantly, my breathing just seemed to get worse. I was discharged after 2 days and sent home. And while at home, monitoring with strict instructions as to how to monitor my clinical signs and symptoms, I woke up in the middle of the night, out of a deep sleep, gasping for air. And this experience was very much a traumatic one, because what it felt as if I was submerged in water. But I'm not. I'm very much awake. And it's just COVID disease, the effects of COVID disease, just ravaging my lungs. I was diagnosed with extensive lung disease. And I actually attempted to call the the ambulance in a near syncopal state. I was unstable. My oxygen saturations had fallen very low. My heart rate was beating above 130s. And I called a Caymanian physician, a friend, Dr. Brandon Bernard. And in very short order, he actually came and picked me up and took me to the hospital and saved my life. He found me in an unstable state. And during the first week of being hospitalized, the major symptom was being unable to breathe. I required various types of supplemental assistance to breathe, to maintain adequate oxygen saturation levels. But in addition to struggling to breathe, I was so weak. The very first week I was in hospital, I was so weak, I couldn't even open my eyelids. I couldn't do anything for myself. I was completely dependent on others. I remember times being awake and just being too weak to open my eyelids, but I can hear what's going on around me. It was horrific. It was traumatic. After about a week, when my symptoms did not improve, there was a panic. There was a panic by loved ones who started a cascading event of my tribe and my loved ones. I got assistance from family friends who are physicians. I got assistance from the Cayman government. I got assistance from the relevant persons at the Health Services Authority. I got assistance from everywhere. For those people who cared about me and wanted to make sure that I survived. And it was after receiving that help that things took a turn for me for the better. But as I became to clinically improve, I became aware of my surroundings. And while I'm aware of my surroundings, I'm taking note of it. I'm seeing the persons who are lying next to me in these wards. I'm seeing young men, just like myself, my age, my clinical presentation, getting the exact same institutional care as I was receiving, and dying, not making it. There's this one particular gentleman I will never forget. Was sent home after 2 days, just as I was. And while walking through the door of the hospital, he collapsed, and coincidentally collapsed in front of the very same doctor who came and picked me up from home and took me to the hospital, Dr. Bernard. And unfortunately, this young man did not make it. I distinctly remember lying on the wards and hearing the persons lying next to me telling their wives my age that they love them, telling them to tell their daughters that they love them. And 2 days later, they died, they didn't make it. And these are the realities of COVID. We have been so blessed to live on an island that has shown over this unprecedented time that we cherish the resource that's most precious to us, which is life itself. And so after receiving a lot of help from family and loved ones, eventually I was discharged home, and you would think that experience in itself was enough. No, that was just the beginning of the story. There was also the long road to recovery, the long-term effects of the virus, the burden of the disease that doesn't necessarily go away after a week, after a month, that can stand with us based on what my pulmonologist says, up to a year or even up to for an entire lifetime. It can change the very quality of your life itself. And so these are serious realities that I'm still dealing with. I still have to work and go through physiotherapy on my lungs and try to avoid long-term damage. I still have to work on my overall conditioning because initially I was not able to function in the same way that I would have before. I still have to work on other long-term symptoms that may not be as severe, but they still affect the quality of your life. And so through this experience, what have I learned? Well, I can tell you, I was actually scheduled to come home for the Pfizer vaccine 2 weeks prior to my admission in the hospital. It was my personal choice at the time that I preferred the Pfizer vaccine and was readily available here. And knowing what I know now and going through the experience that I did, I would never have hesitated to do everything possible to protect myself. Going through severe symptoms of this virus, seeing so many people just like me die, they're not here, leaving behind their loved ones. it's not worth hesitation. It's not worth waiting. The second thing I think I've learned from this is not simply about ourselves. This is bigger than us. At the beginning of the story, I told you that I went to visit my cousin and my family. Well, that same cousin subsequently tested positive. Unfortunately for her, she was asymptomatic. But we have no idea what her potential symptomatology could have been. I couldn't live with myself if she went through what I went through because of me, or worse. So this is not just simply about ourselves, our personal preference. We have to think about others. We have to think about our loved ones. So based on my experience, I encourage every last one, please speak to your physicians, get the relevant information, but do everything you can to protect yourself and your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charles. You have something to say? No? Okay, we'd like to open up the floor now to members of the media, beginning with Ralph from the Canadian Times.
Hey, good afternoon, Donna. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the panel. Thank you for your heartfelt presentations. I'm the hard act to follow. Yes, I'm going to have just a few brief questions. I think Dr. Rodriguez is here, and I'll send all my questions to him. By the way, I have my 2 vaccinations, and I hope that we pass the 80%.
Thank you.
And Dr. Rodriguez, just can you briefly tell us what plans have you increased the preparations for the increase of cases that may follow the reopening? Is the staff staffed up? Do you have the PPEs and stuff that you should have? Because it is a fact that we will have additional cases when we open the borders. And so I just wanted to ask the question.
It's expected that we will have cases when we open the border and also community transmission. We do have all the necessary PPE and all the requirement equipment on island, not only at the HSA, but island-wide to face an increased number of cases of coronavirus on island. When it comes to management of these cases from a public health perspective, definitely we'll continue to do contact tracing that we were doing before, and we will continue to monitor these patients very closely, as we actually doing now. We're still having some positive cases now from travelers, but we continue to monitor these cases very closely on a day-by-day call, everyday call by public health. We'll continue to do that. So the island is prepared to face an increased number of cases in the Cayman Island once we open the border. That's what is expected. However, have been said many times today, if we continue with our good number, with vaccination number, we have the protection, and we are confident that we won't get an alarming number of cases, severe cases and death, like other countries are experiencing around the world.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, sir. I've noticed recently that we have over 800 people this week in isolation. Can you say whether they are isolating in their homes or what percentage are isolated in their homes or government facilities?
The majority of the persons that are isolating at present are isolating at home. We still have a percentage of these of travelers isolating at the different government facilities, but the great majority of them are isolating at home at this stage.
Okay, thank you, Doc. And Donna, my last question is for the Minister of Tourism, Mr. Brand. We have been home for a number of months, having to travel, and residents of the Cayman Islands have always been traveling on a regular basis. Of course, with the borders being opened in a couple of weeks, what would be your recommendation to those of us who like to travel abroad?
Well, considering the fact that I haven't left in 2 years myself, it'd be kind of hard to tell somebody not to go anywhere. But if they can resist it for now, particularly because most of the jurisdictions like the United States are going through what they're going through, we would encourage persons to stay home. But obviously, if you have other matters you have to address, then so be it, because after September 9th, we go to your normal scheduled flights, so to speak, by those airlines that are coming. So there's no longer repatriation flights, so commercial flights are going to be open to whatever schedule that is agreed to by the airport's authority. So ultimately, nobody can stop you at that stage. But if you do travel, take every precaution you can possibly can. Carry your mask with you. Try to stay away from major crowds. Stay with people that you know, those who are safe. And make sure you're vaccinated before you go. That would be my only encouragement, to keep yourself safe at this point. But if you can, stay home if you can handle the wait longer.
Yeah. Just one follow-up. In your conversation with the airlines, did they indicate that they would have mandatory requirements for vaccinated passengers?
No, we have not established that yet. I've been hearing some whispering. I do have a schedule update next week, Monday. Unfortunately, Grace has caused some hurdles in the way of the schedule meetings to know what's happening at the airport and the airline scheduling. So hopefully I can give more of an update to the public in short order. But I do suspect that may happen. Obviously, different countries have different regulations based on their constitutional rights and so forth. So it may vary from airline to airline.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Don. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Ralph. I'd like to now call on Wendy from CNS.
Thank you, Donna. Hello, everyone. Can I speak to Dr. Williams first, please, if I may? Thank you. Can I just check with you? A lot of the tests that are coming back positive, we now are not testing people at the airport. So these people are presumably getting positive results after their first 5 days. Sorry, after their 5 days in isolation. So that's when we're getting all of these positive tests that are now coming.
But they're getting test positive after quarantine. But that can be on day 6, on day 11, or day.
Right. Sorry.
15.
Yes. In some people. So what's that telling us about the situation? Are we going to reintroduce the testing at the airport at any point between now and 14th of October?
That's definitely a decision for the government to make. We are in discussion also on the program board or the possibility of testing on arrival, and we will send recommendation to government, and government will make a decision on that.
Also, do you have any figures that can tell us the percentage of people that are testing positive that have been vaccinated?
We have that information. I don't have it on top of my head, but I can share it with you.
Okay, that's great. Also, I don't know whether you can answer this, but it's just to try and counter the narrative, because it does seem to have taken hold on certain social media platforms. And it seems that there isn't a counter narrative coming from government, that our death rate has increased this year rapidly. And that's why these people are able to suggest that it is as a result of the vaccine. Are you able to say whether we have collected death rate figures this year that are in any way excessive compared to previous years?
Actually, I can tell you as a fact that we have that data, and the death rate so far this year is lower than in previous year.
Fantastic.
As a fact.
That's all I've got for you. I'll ask you. I'll send you an email for the percentage figures for this year. Okay, just a very few questions. Can you tell us what's happening about the legislation, Mr. Premier, regarding the compulsory mandatory vaccine for work permit holders?
Yes, Wendy, if you allow me a second, I want to thank His Excellency for being here. I want to thank my colleagues for being here. I want to thank the incredibly compelling, poignant stories that came from both our colleague, Minister Juliana O'Connor Connolly, and Dr. Charles. Very, very incredible, poignant stories, real life examples of people, the level of engagement and the issues that are involved and the risks that are involved. So thank you very much, both of you. Appreciate it so much. On that point, on the draft legislation, we are working through that. I think I have what is probably a final draft, if not very close to it, and I'll be taking that. I'll be handing it over to my colleague, the Deputy Premier, who has responsibility for WRC. with a C, as my colleague says, to take forward through cabinet and to have it tabled in the LA. I intend to exercise the special circumstances or exceptional circumstances provision of the Constitution to provide shorter notice to allow it to be dealt with quickly.
No rough date.
Sometime, I suspect we'll have it tabled in the next within the next week or so, and then I haven't decided whether exactly how short the notice is going to be, but it is not a very significant bill, so I don't think it's going to require. And we've talked about this for some time now, so I don't think it's going to require a lot of consultation time.
Thank you. The only other thing really I wanted to talk about was the vaccine campaign and what more is going to happen with the addition of like the clinics that you're talking about having in constituencies and the vaccine bus. Is there anything else that you're planning to try and counter some of this anti-vaxxer narrative that is getting it's spreading on social media quite excessively now? It's coming out of a lot of places. It's on a lot of social media. It's even on the radio a lot, you know.
Well, speaking for myself, I intend to be very much engaged on all forms of media to try to address this issue. It is perplexing to me, as I mentioned earlier, that people that I regard as very capable and intelligent people can buy into some of this misinformation and let it influence their reasoning and their conclusions on whether they should take a vaccine or not. But I find that speaking to people, engaging with people, talking with them about the issue, confronting their their views on the issue, I think those are the ways that we can help to break through some of these resistant perspectives. So I feel we are, we're going. And I'm sure all of my colleagues will be doing the same. We'll be engaging fully on different forms of social
Is there any
media.
plans to extend the vaccine clinics? Because now they've been closed on Mondays and they close early. Is there a plan to sort of open up the vaccine access more than we have already?
Yes, there are plans for that. And as we stated, we're extending it to our constituencies and we're working closer with public health and HSA. Those will be coming out in the coming days. I know that we've seen a lot of resistance and hesitancy in those 16 to, let's say, 25, 30. And this does take a lot of work behind the scenes, understanding that we're dealing with our medical professionals and HSA's public health staff. But I'm hearing the outcry for more town hall meetings so persons can come and they can share and ask the questions to demystify a lot of it. And we are going to have to start using more of the younger persons out there that are very influential in social media in order to reach these younger persons here in Cayman. And I'm quite sure my colleague and I and the rest of the PAC government, Minister Bryan, may actually have some other tricks up his sleeves that is supported by all of us, but more engaging, coming down to their level, but using those influencers to really get to that specific target audience and age group, because that's where we're seeing the greatest hesitancy. And also there are a lot of our Caymanian older persons that are just now coming forward. And we're hoping by giving a definitive date of October that we will see an uptake and FDA approval as well. So in very short days, and I'll definitely keep all of you in the media informed of these possible town hall meetings as best as we can.
Okay, great. Can I just
Wendy, if I
I've got another question for you. So just let me ask it and then you can give me all in a thing. Can you just make it clear on the 14th of October, people will still need to quarantine if they do not have verifiable, but anyone will be able to come at that point?
Correct.
Or is that on the 9th of September? Will anybody be able to come? Like, are you lifting, like, because at the moment, the only people that can come are friends, like relatives.
The flights are no longer repatriation flights as of September the 9th.
So people won't have to go to Travel Cayman and say, oh, I'm a family member or I own a property or whatever. They can just be anyone.
Well, they do still have to do that process, but they're not restricted to travels. So because of the quarantining processes between September 9th and October 14th, you still have to do the Travel Cayman process to get the approval to come.
Right, so between 9th and 14th, still need approval. After the 14th, no approval.
Well, we have to go through those regs between now and then. We can definitely give you more updates at that time.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to add on to the question previously.
Yeah.
And particularly, yes, some tricks up my sleeve. I am appealing to everyone who's watching. We live in a world of many different pulpits, many different platforms, many different social media, from WhatsApp to Instagram to Facebook to, I don't even know what the latest one is now, TikTok. I make myself sound so old, but my point is, you know what, if you've been vaccinated, I'm certain that you've made the decision for a reason. We need you to help us, help you, help everybody else. It's time for you to do your part. Get on your platform and say your piece. We're all in this together. I know that getting vaccinated is a very private thing. Some of us are okay with standing firm to say why we do it or why others should do it. And believe it or not, when people feel that they're not alone, they get the courage that is necessary. So I ask each and every one of you, tonight I want to see social media blasting everywhere with everybody giving 30 seconds of their reasons why they are vaccinated. Because your friend who may be watching, may be dealing with it privately and scared and don't know what to do, may see it and said, you know what, this is somebody I love, somebody I respect. And your words might be the encouraging words to make them do the right thing. This is about saving lives. So we ask you to help us do the right thing.
Thank you. That's all I need.
Okay, thank you very much. Wendy, I have lots of questions coming in from the public, but I'm going to ask a couple before we move on to Andrell from the Cayman Compass. One of the questions from the public is, will vaccinations be introduced in schools?
That's a health question.
Okay.
Well, I think just, I mean, Ms. Julie, you would prefer if I answer it? I think we have not considered anything along the lines of mandating vaccines in schools. You know, I can't say at this point that that would be an impossible consideration, but it depends on, I mean, we're obviously at this point, we only have approval or emergency approval for children between the ages of 12 and 15. So it couldn't relate to those younger, those in primary school, for example. I suppose at some point in the future that may change. Those studies are ongoing at this point. I think we would have to take advice before we even considered anything like that. And we'd have to be clear that there was significant benefit in doing that. And there was significant risk that we're trying to address by making that sort of decision. But that is along the same lines as, you know, are we considering mandatory vaccinations for the country? And the answer is no, we're not considering that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Panton. One of the other questions is it being considered, or should it be considered, that once the borders open, that mass and social distancing should be happening again in public places?
I will say that if you look at the plan that we outlined previously, it did contemplate that we might have to reimpose public health protocols around masking and social distancing that people have been familiar with in the past. To be honest, I suspect that is going to have to be a very specific consideration for us. We're going to have to strongly consider that in various different scenarios. And that is something that we would be, as a government, seeking to consider. And if we decide to implement that on a mandatory basis, it would be done in the coming weeks so that it is in time for the increasing risk after October 14th.
One final question. This might be for Dr. Sam. It relates to the smart cards or the digitized vaccination cards. Many people who got the vaccine, let's say from when vaccinations were available across the globe, they have paper vaccination cards as opposed to having them digitized. And they're Caymanians who want to come home, but they've been vaccinated, they don't necessarily want to do the quarantine, but they can't get that information transferred over digitally. Is this something that public health has had to deal with? And if so, what kind of advice would you give to persons who are in that position?
Okay, so we have two scenarios here. So everyone that have been vaccinated here in the Cayman Islands, the HSA have been working with the ministry and others, and we will have an electronic card that could be securely verified in the first week in September. For those Cayman residents in the Cayman Islands that have their vaccine in other jurisdictions that cannot be verified at this present, we're also working in a process to be able to, once we get this information, we can confirm that information internally. We will add it to the database of the HSA, the CERNA electronic database, and we will be able to also produce an electronic card for them.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on. Thank you, Dr. Sam. We're going to move on now to Andrel Harris from the Compass.
Donna, while we await him come, I just want to give the public a little update as to one of the questions asked before about whether persons would have to be apply for travel to Cayman after September 9th. As per our reopening plan, up until January, which we hope that we'll eventually get to the all clear, so to speak, and welcome back. Travel applications will be needed all the way to that point, because even though a person may be vaccinated, for those who are not vaccinated, they too still have to go through a process of quarantining. So that will continue to be monitored. If it has to extend past January, depending on the circumstances, and nothing conspires against us, hopefully it'll be done in January.
All right, thank you, Minister Brian. Andrel?
Thank you. My first question is to Dr. Rodriguez as well. In the hot seat. Dr. Rodriguez, it was said that mandatory PCR testing would be in place for frontline staff, but that hasn't happened. It was also said that we would receive a definition of what constitutes as a frontline worker. Can we, that also hasn't been released. Why has that been the case? And when do you anticipate that a definition will be provided?
On the regulations for testing, PCR testing for frontline workers. Once this is ready, and they should be ready shortly, it will be made public. Who will be a frontline worker? That will also come up with a regulation, but definitely now anyone who have contact with travelers will be considered frontline workers. So everyone who work at the airports or the point of entry are considered frontline workers, and also some healthcare provider.
Thank you. Mayor Panton.
Yes, sir.
In light of the recent population statistics that were provided by the ESO, which clash with what the government had previously projected as Cayman's population, what figure is the government working with as far as the 80% target is concerned?
Well, you say clash. Both numbers come from the same Economics and Statistics Office. The one is just the 71,000 is just the upper range, and the 65,876, I think it is sort of the median. And we are at this point still sticking with the 71,000, but I think the reality is that given what has been transpiring with the Delta variant, this issue about an 80% target is sort of getting a bit fuzzy. I mean, we're here today to appeal to the people of the country to get vaccinated, and we need as many of our people vaccinated as possible. I've said before that if we didn't get to an 80% target, we would consider what the position was at the time and make a decision. At this point, we are looking to basically make that decision around the 1st of October. 30th September, 1st of October, 2nd of October, somewhere around that time period. I have had a conversation today with the Honorable Deputy Governor, who chairs the program board and who gives us all excellent advice. And I've indicated to him that effectively we'd be asking them a week before that point to give us their perspective, their views on where we're at, what's happening out in the outside world, and what their recommendation would be. And effectively, the day before we meet, I expect to have a full caucus meeting all day about this. Knowing my colleagues, there is going to be it might even be 2 days, but effectively, I mean, this is a serious issue. We've got to do it justice. Nobody takes this very lightly. So we're going to get an update the day before we meet, or maybe even the morning that we meet, from the program board as to any changes that may be relevant to our discussion and consideration at that time. We have to act on and be informed by, and our actions have to be informed by the best available information from the program board, from the various representative bodies that are on that board, and specifically from public health and Dr. Lee and Dr. Williams. So we're going to have our work cut out for us at that point to make a decision. I don't think any of us are afraid of making a decision. What we are afraid of is a situation where we have people who, for no good reason, end up being susceptible to COVID and getting very sick, possibly dying. None of us want to see that. None of us want to feel that. I mentioned earlier the situation with our colleagues in the BVI. And I know Premier Foy there, I can't imagine the pain that he must feel, or must have felt in over the past month and a half or so, of knowing people and losing those individuals, feeling the sense of responsibility for the people of his country. Those people who died were all unvaccinated. All unvaccinated. And there was the same challenges of vaccine resistance, vaccine hesitancy. We have somehow got to break through that. We have got to get to that better consciousness of ourselves, for people to get beyond that and realize that this is something that's very serious, and they've got to do it for themselves. They've got to do it for their families. They've got to do it for their neighbors, their community, and their country.
A few more quick questions. Governor Roper, of course, as has been stated by the panel several times, the COVID, the Pfizer vaccine has been approved by the FDA. We haven't heard any words of approvals from the UK just yet. Are you able to confirm or speak to the timeline on approval from the UK on the vaccine?
Well, I mean, it is approved by the UK. It's gone through very rigorous testing and trials, and the UK has approved the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer and I think Moderna as well. So the regulators have approved it. I mean, all these regulatory systems are slightly different. Each country does it in a different way, but the UK, the vaccines are approved in the UK. I'm not aware there is another process going on where we will get another
approval. It's there.
Well, unfortunately, their website says it's approved for temporary use.
But that's been going on now for 9 months. So I don't think anyone should have any concern about that at all. The UK has vaccinated over 30 million people now with this vaccine, and as has been demonstrated today, these are incredibly safe, effective vaccines, and the UK would not be rolling them out in the way that it was unless it was fully convinced that these vaccines are safe. So I just think that's really not a relevant issue.
Perhaps Minister Bryan or Mr. Turner might be able to take this one. Several people have been asking, in light of the proposed reopening strategies, when will the ban on people limits be lifted? The 500 indoor and 1,000 outdoor.
Be lifted? Oh, you're going the wrong direction, buddy.
Wrong direction.
No, when we go in towards increasing the risk of COVID spread, we're going to be reducing the numbers. Now, we haven't decided what that will be, but I can tell you the appetite of our colleagues are one that there may have to be a reduction of those numbers. What those ones will be the Minister of Health will definitely share those because she's responsible for that area. Let's make her speak for herself, obviously, but wrong direction.
Yes, it's definitely the wrong direction. As we stated here by more than one of my colleagues, we're increasing our risk after October 14th. So we will see, and this will be confirmed, that numbers, at least for the beginning phases, will go down in public gatherings. But again, there's more to that to come because as a government, we have to do and meet with the program boards who guide us in regards to that. But definitely, as we get more of the opening, the numbers will go down.
Two final questions.
Andrea, I just want to add to that. If you go back and look at the details around our opening plan, you will see that it specifically says, as I mentioned earlier, that we would be contemplating reimposing public health protocols, which would be social distancing and masking. It also says that we might be contemplating reducing the gathering numbers, gathering restrictions. So at the moment, the gathering restrictions outdoors is 1,000, indoors is 500. We clearly said in the plan that we, I think it was after October 14th, we would be considering the possibility of reducing those numbers. So you may see further regulations changing the current restrictions and definitely reducing them, reflective of the increased level of risk.
Now we've seen a relative plateauing of the uptake of vaccines, and despite the various forms of vaccination drives. Premier Panton, would you support if the business community was to refuse to provide services or goods to unvaccinated people who do not fall within a medical exemption?
Can you repeat that for me?
Would you support if the business community was to refuse to provide services and goods to people who do not fall, or to unvaccinated people who do not have a medical exemption?
So you're asking if, for example, a restaurant can say we're only going to serve people who can demonstrate to us that they're vaccinated.
Yes.
So we're not going to serve people who are unvaccinated.
Yes.
I want to say in general that we support the business community imposing whatever level of restrictions they feel are important to and necessary to protect their staff, their customers, and their business reputations. I don't think it's, at this point, we're not going to be saying, yes, keep people who are not vaccinated from coming in. That is something that is up to them to decide. In fact, it may be something, and I've said this before in a statement in Parliament, that it is something that we might consider ourselves in terms of regulation. But it is not something at this point that we have a specific opinion on or promoting one way or another. I leave it entirely up to businesses to make that decision for themselves. But I support them making and having the right to make the decision that they feel is best to protect their staff and their other customers and their business reputation as a whole.
Final question is simply, in the event that the COVID transmission or community transmission of the virus takes hold, how swiftly would the borders be closed and or measures implemented to stem the spread?
I think in our reopening plan, we basically said that 2 separate clusters of infection would trigger an immediate assessment, public health assessment. Now, those, depending on what they are and exactly what the implications are,
leading to hospitalization. To
requiring.
Yeah, sorry, that's it. Requiring hospitalization. That's correct, Governor. Thank you for reminding me. Requiring hospitalization. But what I was going to say was the circumstances around those will determine whether what actions are taken. We did not set out, and we don't have any definitive actions in mind. We will look at the circumstances. Obviously, we're going to do it quickly and make an assessment of what the risks are. And I'm sure that public health and the program board will be involved in making recommendations to the government as to what actions to take. And we will then immediately take those actions as we feel are necessary to protect the country as a whole and particular areas that may be subjected to this risk.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Andrell. Finally, any brief final remarks before we close out?
Yes, with permission.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to remind the listening audience that we are in the midst of the hurricane season. We just saw what Grace graciously gave us, and thank the Lord, no human life was lost. This doesn't mean that we should not continue to be prepared. Some of us I know who I've talked to weren't really prepared for Grace. Let's not make that mistake happen again. Let's not prepare ourselves. Get your supplies, know where your routes are, know where your shelters are, get the boards if you need to shut up your house. The projections are it's going to be a rather active season, and we have a lot of other things having to deal with. So please continue to do your part to be prepared for this hurricane season.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Donna, again, I want to thank everybody who have joined us this afternoon, both on the panel as well as viewing. We really appreciate their level of interest, and I hope they see the sincerity and the concern and understand the rationale to take this seriously, to get vaccinated, to not buy into the it is very distressing to receive messages from people saying folks, that is I give my dog ivermectin to prevent him from getting heartworms. It's called HeartGuard, right? That's what we use that for. You give it to the horse. I probably very likely we have anything like that prescribed in Cayman, but those are not things. That kind of thing isn't going to help us. This vaccine that we're getting for free, with a 96% efficacy generally, and I think it's 86% against the Delta variant effectiveness. This is what is going to help us. That and using our common sense that we all have, and proper social distancing and mask wearing eventually when we put that in place, I guess. Those are the types of things that will help us. And to me, this is not a popularity contest. You can hate me today, you can hate me tomorrow. I'm fine. I hope you'll tell me you love me for place and by making it, because I know I've suffered a loss, and nobody needs to tell me that death is final. And we don't. I don't want to feel it. I don't want to see other people suffer through that. So let's work together. Let's come together as a country, and let's make this happen. Let's make Cayman a continued success. We have found ways to do it in the past. We've suffered through hurricanes. We have become a fantastic world-class financial services center. We have great medical services. We have great doctors. Let's believe in them. Let's believe in the system, and let's make sure that we can make Cayman a success in terms of reopening, reestablishing our contact with the rest of the world in a safe way.
Thank you very much, Premier Panton. We'd like to thank you, the public, and of course the media for being here with us today. To our panelists, thank you for sharing the news and information that's so important to all of us. For a schedule of vaccine locations as well as clinic openings, you can go online to hsa.ky or explore.gov.ky. We thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.